At first, I ignored the dripping sound. I figured it was just raining, but the drip, drip, drip just wouldn't stop. No matter where I go, it's there. I've searched the whole house by now for the source, but no matter where I stand, it seems to be coming from over my head. I called a plumber. They should be here between 10 and 2. I'm really hoping for 10. Sound is driving me crazy. I try to distract myself with music, but no matter how far I turn the stereo up, the dripping is still there. Incessant, just loud enough to form a backbeat. Drip, drip, drip. The plumber showed up. His eyes are red like he hasn't been sleeping. I explain the problem, and he goes to look. Yeah, I've been hearing the dripping for a couple of days now, the plumber says from under the sink. The leak clearly isn't there, but I don't say anything about it. He's the plumber, after all. It says so on his name tag, along with his name, which I'm certain he told me, but I must have forgot. The plumber keeps talking. I'm starting to think it's some kind of tinnitus because the dripping's following me around. This drip does that? I admit. I can't seem to narrow down where it is. Well, it isn't here, the plumber says, coming up from under the sink. His eyes look even redder now. I got a few more places to check, though. I follow him around the house. He weaves a bit drunkenly, and I start to wonder why his eyes are so red. Just my luck. I get a plumber who can't find the drip because he's hitting the bottle of scotch. Been getting a lot of these calls, the plumber slurs. You're lucky we could get you in. Seems like everyone has a leak they can't find these days. Just find it, I say. The tapping, dripping, dropping, clanking sound makes it hard to be patient. Maybe that's why the first thing I thought when the plumber dropped to the floor was, I'm supposed to be thankful for this alcoholic showing up. My second reaction is better, as it clicks with me that something's seriously wrong with this guy. I sink to the floor beside him and reach out. I call his name, which I only know because of the nameplate on his chest. I've forgotten his name even as I say it. He doesn't respond. Little pool of blood spreading on the floor from his nose. The next bit happens in a whirl. I call 911 and the paramedics show up. One of them has bloodshot eyes, and I find myself staring at that rather than at the corpse on the floor, because by then I know the plumber's dead. He hasn't so much as blinked since he fell to the floor. They take the body away and leave me with a little pool of blood slowly congealing on the tiles in my kitchen. When I head to get some towels to clean it up, I pass the bathroom mirror. My eyes look a little bloodshot too. Probably the dripping. Makes it hard to sleep at night. Though, maybe it's time to pick up a bottle of scotch myself. I'm not usually a heavy drinker, but something to help me relax a bit. The next day I'm sitting in my living room with the TV blaring in a doomed attempt to drown out the drip, drip, drip. A report comes on the news that catches my attention, mainly because I recognize the plumber's face. The familiar plumber's snapshot is alongside a few others on a screen cap. The details of the report are hard to concentrate on as the drip, drip, drip seems to wind in among the calmly stated facts from the news reporter. But even with that, I managed to get the basics. The people on screen, including my plumber, are all dead. That part makes sense. The rest doesn't seem to compute properly, even with my limited knowledge of biology and how the body works. The findings in his death don't feel right. When they brought my plumber to the hospital to examine him, there was no brain in his head. His entire skull was filled with blood. He was the first. Lucky me to have the first die in my kitchen and leave a pool of blood. The others are victims that have come in since his death. All dead now, according to the newscaster, with her perfect lipstick and her wide blue eyes. The CDC's been called in. The newscaster gives a list of warning signs of this new disease. I barely hear most of it because it sounds more like a practical joke than a real thing. The only thing I really pick up on is the dripping sound. The dripping in my own head wouldn't let me tune that factoid out. Apparently all the victims heard a dripping sound, which the doctor and the scientist are proposed was the sound of blood dripping into their empty skull, filling the place where their brain was supposed to be. I turned off the TV and headed upstairs to bed, despite it all just being the middle of the day. People can't live without brains. Even I know that. Despite being unreasonably exhausted, trying to sleep is hard with the dripping sound. I can't escape the repetitive noise. I shut my blinds, trying to blot out the sunshine outside, and climb back under the coverlet. I find myself mulling over the TV report. It can't be real. How could they even know that the people had empty skulls prior to the dripping? Were people coming in to report this to them before dying? And who would have even thought to look for such a thing? Outside the window, the sound of a siren screeches by, fading into a keening sound in the distance. By the time I finally drift off to sleep, I've convinced myself that I imagine the entire report. I dream that I'm trying to find a leak in an old basement that smells like mold and copper. I find blood dripping down the wall instead, and realize I'm standing in a puddle of it. By the time I get back to the basement stairs, it's up to my knees. Morning comes, and the dripping sounds louder, more like the plop of water in a full bathtub than droplets hitting the porcelain. Like my brain's filling up. Except that thought comes directly from the news report that I must have dreamed. I go downstairs and turn the TV on again to make breakfast. There's a dried pool of blood in the kitchen floor. I should have cleaned that up. I'm gearing up to do that as I eat some dry toast for breakfast. But the news comes on and distracts me. Pictures of the local hospital and a new set of faces fill the screen. I see a number, but I don't recall the death total a moment later. It must be hard to remember things without a brain, I tell myself. I don't listen to the newscaster's report this time. Instead, I pick up my smartphone and do my own research. The report I heard was real, or at least the report really happened. Lots of people are calling the disease made up and falsified, but I noticed that everyone from where I lived is scared. There are more reports of deaths, wives telling what happened to their husbands, children saying what happened to their parents, and every story starts with that dripping that no one else can hear. I do some research on the doctors who are putting in this insane claim. They were all respectable before this, and their reports still chill me in a way I don't expect because all of them are saying exactly what I thought. This shouldn't be possible. People can't live without brains, but they are. That makes me study the report carefully, searching for the underlying fact, even if those facts contradict logic. The body count's up in the hundreds now. Didn't take long. The disease seems like it takes about 4 to 5 days in total. Now, I'm sure of what the sound in my head is. It's a drip, slow and steady, of blood into my empty skull, filling the space left vacant. Drip, drip, drip. No matter how much I study the report, there's no explanation for this phenomenon, nor why the people die when the empty space is full. But they do, and by inference, that means I will too, unless I can figure out a way around my looming fate. I clean up the dried blood on my kitchen floor, overflow from the plumber's brain. He should have drained it beforehand, and brought himself some time. How full is my skull? I'm 3 days into this awful dripping. I go out to my car and consider driving away, but the dripping would just follow me. When I go back inside, I'm thankful that I didn't leave. The TV tells me that the borders of the city have been closed. We're all in full quarantine for the rest of the world. Another fact sneaks in to frighten me. The death toll is up in the thousands now. And that's just the ones that have been reported and tallied. There are only 2 things the city's doing now: dripping and dropping dead. That strikes me as funny, and I laugh. I can see my reflection in the kitchen window as night falls. My eyes are a horrid shade of red. I wouldn't mind some scotch, but pretty sure that even if there were places open out there, they wouldn't serve me. No one seems to know if this is contagious, but no one's taking any chances. We don't know what the cause of this plague is, but the quarantine has people thinking that it can be contained. That means that we're spreading it somehow. No scotch in the house. I lock all my doors and bar the windows as night deepens. There are bodies in the street. I can't find a death toll online anymore. No one's doing anything akin to scientific research. I find several places where people outside the city are discussing what's happening. I try to leave comments, but my fingers don't seem to want to type anything sane. I can locate a few like me, typing similar comments. All we talk about is the dripping. The drip, drip, drip. But it started to sound like a ticking sound to me. After all, that drip is my life, ticking back to 0. In the middle of the night, I hear a gunshot fired, then another. Someone runs by outside my house, and I'm pleased that they don't fall down and die. There's enough corpses outside my house. When I survive this, I don't want these bodies to be my responsibility. No one out there is going to help me, not those talking about the disease from their safe, unaffected cities, and certainly not the dwindling population of the city around me. I stare at my kitchen floor and think about the plumber. Ending up like him is hardly appealing, so I won't. His problem, I decide, was that he didn't have the information I do. He didn't know what was happening to him, so he couldn't address it. He didn't know that he didn't have a brain in his skull, and it was slowly filling up. My leg up is that I know these things. I wonder how we lost our brains and if we can get them back. But those are facts that I don't have. The people who came after me may have them, but I have to make do with what I know. And what I know is that my skull is filling up with blood, and I'll die. A smile spread across my face. I feel it stretching unused muscles. All I have to do in order to not die is not let my skull fill up. I head into the garage and dig in the tools there. I find my drill and bring it inside. Safety first. I wash and sanitize the bit, then I leave my sink faucet on. I figure I can wash and rinse the thing as I go in if it becomes necessary. Good thing I know my sink doesn't leak. I giggle a little. I'm getting silly. It's all the dripping, I guess. I tell myself it's hard to focus with the dripping, and maybe, just maybe, it's hard to think clearly with no brain. The best place to go in, I decide, is the dead center of the skull. I don't need to worry about hitting my brain, after all. I plug the drill in and put the bit where it belongs. I picture the blood coming out of the plumber's nose. Obviously, that doesn't work as a drain before death, but I'm smart enough to create my own drain. My head would never fill up. Nope, I'll just let that pesky dripping blood drain out the front. The back might have been a better choice. Not to mess up my face, but I can't properly reach back there. Forehead it is, I guess. I turn the drill on and press it to my forehead. You'd think it'd hurt a lot, but the truth is, it doesn't hurt all that much at all. After the first surprise jolt, it's more like a toothache. Nasty, but localized. And the knowledge it would be over soon kept me going. The drill bit pops through the other side of my skull. I feel it because the resistance is gone, and the drill just slides forward. I pull it out and tipped my head over the sink, letting the blood drain out and get washed away by the flow of water. I wonder who else has thought of this as I clean up bone fragments and blood from the kitchen. Then I wander into my living room. I don't turn on the TV. I can't hear it over the dripping anymore. People are screaming outside. I feel sorry for them. I figured it out. I'm safe, but they're still out there, in the worst of it. I go to the window and look out, peeling back the curtain. The world is fresh and new, vital. Looks redder than it did before. It's actually a little hard to see. Oh, I should have thought of that. The blood is draining into my eyes. Not dripping now, but there's a lot of red. More than the tiny drips could account for. Can't see anything through the blood drip, dripping over my eyes. You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them. Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor, and thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you're thinking you might like to become one of my patrons, follow the link below to my Patreon. And as always, however you support the show, I appreciate it. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.